And moving over to the roof gable ends, or the wall gable ends as it were, we can assemble these just basically on the shapes. You can't really go wrong with this. The part numbers aren't even on the panels. You basically just set out so that you've got two symmetrical gable ends here, and you marry up the flared edges, and they're held together initially just by throwing a screw through here, the bolt and nut type, and that holds on a long bracket. Again, you don't really need the part numbers for this, it's all self-explanatory when you see this stuff in the bag. So one screw through there on either side, and then to hold the whole panel unit together you have these channeling sections, which are part numbers 60318. Again, there's 4 of these. They're fairly obvious once they marry up to the panel and they run the length, they meet halfway, and the screw goes through from the inside through each of the available holes on the large and the smaller sections. This again here, these don't even have the part numbers on them. Again, they're fairly obvious when they're in the bag. There's 4 of those, and they just marry up in a symmetrical fashion so that the flares are facing to the outside. 4 screws, and that's that part complete. All of the screws have the washer on them, except for the bolt type ones up here and here. And then for the door channeling, so you'll only have a door at one side of this. You need this section here, which is a right angle panel, 61502. That basically comes up centrally on one of these gable ends, and the screws pass through from the opposite side into these channels here, which the screw bites into the smaller holes on this side. There's 2 of those which make up the door slider set. A bit difficult for me to hold that all together in one go, but I'll show you once I've got it screwed together. The instructions is saying that I only need to use 4 screws, and only through this right angle panel and into the channels to hold it in place. So there's either a reason for that later on in the instruction build, that we might be adding more screws, or it might just be an error in the instructions, but either way I'll assemble that and show you what it looks like. The opposite end doesn't have the door, so that just remains with the channeling holding the back side of the gable together with the screws, and plus the central tail unit there that will be used, I imagine, to support the ridge beam of the roof. So I'll get together this door channeling and then we'll come back to that. Here we are putting in the plastic runners, which I'm assuming the doors will hold on to. They have to be put in a certain configuration. They are made up of a crescent shaped piece of plastic with a hole and a pin, symmetrical on either side, but you have to go in a certain order, and that order, as per the instructions, is as follows: with the curved edge of the crescent facing downwards away from the pitch of the roof, you have a hole at the top left and a pin at the lower right, and then you just need to match that up with a mirror image for the next one. So the 2 pins are closest together, that's lower right pin, lower left pin. That completes that step. And then for the next 2, the next pairing, again you go for a pin on the lower right again, same as you did this side, and then you match it up with its partner with a pin on the lower left. So you've got one pair with the pins together and another pair with the pins together, each on the lower side. And you may need to tape those up in order to stop them falling out during the rest of the assembly. But that completes that page of the instructions. We'll move on to the next. Okay, we're on to the next page. Still building part of the roof structure, I guess. We're on to 502.14 for these panels, and altogether I think there's about 6 or 8 of these units. we're going to deal with this first one. Just a pair of these to begin with the folded lip at the top, and same again with this one. We need to overlap these beams by 233mm, which, to put it into an easier school of thought, you skip out these first 4 holes, and you skip out these first 4 holes, and you just marry up the first or the second set of 4. So, and you can do that either way around. You will notice that some of these holes are cut slightly roughly, or the machine work hasn't quite worked in the factory properly, but that's basically why. Still on these 502.14 beams. These form the support beams, the ridge beam for the roof structure, and basically you've got 2 pairs. You've got 502.14 overlapping the same panel again by 233mm. The same again with this one, and then this one is going to be a structure of 4 of the 502.14 panels. You basically need to have the folded edge faced out to the left for 1 pair, and folded out to the right for the other pair, and then again they overlap by 233mm, so that you end up with a side profile of a T shape. Now, with our roof supports and the ridge beam, we can start assembling the gable ends onto the ridges. This central one, the T profile one, which supports the middle of the roof, or the ridge board as we could call that, we basically slide that support bracket, the quadrilateral support bracket that has this shape to it, that goes up through the middle of the T shape on these 2. Once you've got that in, you can then apply 2 of the bolts through the holes that line up, and that sits just underneath the lip of the gable end. And for the 2 side ones, we have to push those down in between the gap that makes up the gable shape, and then 2 bolts will go through the folded lip of the gable shape, and then you can bring up the support bracket that we added earlier, and that will line up with the second hole in that remains. With all of the 3 ridge beams in place, we've now got a roof structure starting to take shape. I've already put the other lower eaves level support across the back there, and I'm just about to assemble this side. Now, these part numbers are called a 501.14. They should overlap by 234mm in the centre, but to make it easy again, if you just stick to a rule of thumb that 4 screw holes overlapping will give you the correct length, and then once they're together with just 2 screws according to the instructions, you can then put each end, this inner lip here slides in underneath the barge board edge, and then 2 screws in each end, and that will bring you up to a complete, at least a skeleton roof structure. So with all the framework together, we can now move on to the panel work. Prior to doing that though, you must measure from corner to the opposite corner, and the same again for the far corner to the near corner. Make sure those measurements are equal, and then that's the frame squared up. You can then add the panels as per the instructions. At the front edge here, where we've got this overhang of the roof panel, that's a 204, then there's 201, 201, 203, and then you do a, not so much a mirror image, but a flipped image for this side. It goes to 203 at the front, and 201, 201, 204 at the back. And then once you've got one side of that on, it's going to make the roof structure rigid and clamp it down in a square position. Adding on to that, you've got the eaves level panels to go down. That's a 504.1, and a 504.2. They're simple enough to add. This is the roof panel work complete. We've got all of the panels on for the main roof structure and the ridge caps. These go in a certain order. We've got 50307 and then a 50207. Basically you just follow the instructions for which ones go on the front edge, which ones go in the center, and which ones on the rear edge. We've got the Yardmaster badge over the front here. That's all fairly straightforward, and on both sides these finishing panels that screw down onto the overhang of the roof sheeting, and that pretty well completes the roof structure. I believe there is some finishing touches to be done to the corners with a couple of plastic corner pieces to take away the sharp edge there. I'll add those afterwards, maybe once the roof is all the way up on the shed itself.